to another episode of the Pitch and Tonic podcast. As usual, Kyle and I are your hosts, but we have a guest today. I'm Sarah Jane Bavrin.
I'm Kyle Morrow, and our special guest.
Hello, I'm Gabrielle Friedman.
Woo! So, Gabrielle, why don't you introduce our listeners to who you are and so they can kind of understand where you're coming from, what you do.
Sure. So I am a recent graduate of Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle, Washington. I have been singing and dancing and acting pretty much my whole life, but I went to college for musical theater and got my BFA in that, hoping to go to grad school and get an MA, when this pandemic clears up. We'll see. We'll see what's on the next part of my story. But yeah, I was mostly into music in high school, so it was kind of interesting to have a transition into musical theater from there. I did a lot of jazz, and I was in opera for a year. I don't know why. And from there, just grew up with a huge appreciation for the arts. So yeah.
Awesome. I had no idea you did opera. That's like news to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't talk about it too much. It's God, I'm not a soprano. I'll be the first to say that. And my opera teacher was like, "You're a soprano." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't want to argue with you. You went to Juilliard, so."
Cool. That's awesome. Thanks for introducing yourself. So these podcasts this kind of starts the month of February, and we wanted to definitely highlight Black artists in the community that both Kyle and I know. And so Kyle, I think, reached out to Gabrielle. And so we're going to kind of jump in with some topics that she came up with. So let's go.
Yeah. Kind of wanted to kick things off and talk about my college experience, just because it's A, the most immediate thing, and B, we go to Cornish College of the Arts. We've all been to this institution, and it was, I think, a really interesting 3 years. It's weird being out of it because there's so much that I'm reflecting on. And I'm like, oh, that was really great. Or oh, wow, how did I even let that slide? Cornish, for those of you who don't know, is something called a PWI, which is a predominantly white institute. And so being there, kind of coming from LA to Seattle, is really a bit of a culture shock. LA is a really densely populated place. It's very diverse. And Seattle is not. There are a lot of people within the tech industry that live there. And so, they're kind of in their own little Amazon hub. But as far as the arts industry, I think the consensus is that there are a lot of people of color wanting to break into the arts in Seattle. But as far as the people that you see represented, it's mostly white faces. So, coming into that for 3 years, it was definitely interesting. During my time at Cornish, I found a lot of people and mentors who kind of guided me through it. But at the same time, it was really hard. It was hard to find community. It was hard to sort of get my voice heard on a lot of issues. For about 2 years, I ran something called the POC Union, which was really important to me just because we would hold meetings and kind of rant about things that were going on, or just come up with ideas that we can reach out to the community, to the larger Seattle community. And that union was started by Amina Maya and Ebony Miranda and Lindsay Zay Summers. They all kind of brought it into fruition. But even when they were going through it, they were like, we're not getting any sort of faculty support with this. And when we do, they're sort of asking us to do all of these things that like a paid member of faculty should be doing. And as students, as full-time students, there's just not a way to commit to that. So, Cornish it's a growing institution. It's been around for 100 years. So you would think that things like this would be put in place, but we've really only seen sort of those steps towards inclusivity happen within the past 5 years. So it's disappointing, but not, like it's baby steps. But I remember a lot of the time, oh gosh, there's my dog in the background.
That's okay.
I remember a lot of the time, there was just this like weird fear of speaking up. I feel like I was one of the more vocal people in my class when it came to calling out like teachers who presented biases, and I didn't mind it, but I wish that others weren't so reliant on like people of color being the ones to always have to speak up when they see something weird happen. Because after class, people would be like, "Oh, that was weird," and I'd be like, "Well, why didn't you say something in the moment?" Because if things aren't dealt with in the moment, then the same things just occur over and over again. um and like I appreciate good intentions, but good intentions can only really do so much, especially when you're trying to incite change in a greater institution like Cornish. So yeah, I I know it sounds like I'm like dogging on this institute. It's I was thankful for the experiences and the opportunities. Um, but Cornish definitely has a ways to go before it can call itself the inclusive university that it claims to be.
No, I completely agree with you on that. At least when Sarah and I were thinking about like reaching out to our, our old classmates of that are POC, I can only think of a handful of people.
Right.
And I was like, there are so many white people.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's just a huge problem. And it was just like, there are some people that I was like, well, I kind of know them. Like, Gabrielle, you and I had how many classes together?
Right.
Two classes. And in those classes, I think it was like, 3 people were POC. So
yeah, it's and like not only that, but where you don't see yourself represented in the classroom, you definitely don't see it represented in our faculty. I think I had like one black teacher. I had Tinka, who is a person of color. I think that's it. Like I really I couldn't tell you. And then of course, like I took a class in the music department, and that was really, really, really fun. But yeah, it was just like, wow, this is it, huh? Cool. All right.
and then I noticed, and I don't know, you can speak on this too, where a lot of institutions try to include people of color, and then it ends up just coming off straight up of like just tokenism.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Cornish website, you'd be like, "Oh wow, this this school has like so many people of color," and it's because they literally target us whenever they're like doing photos for the school. But I mean, I don't think that's a Cornish problem. Unfortunately, I know a lot of like colleges do that. Um, but as far as like their commitment to diversity, I just don't see us doing anything for the Seattle community. Whenever I would like go off campus, unless it was in the arts, people didn't know the name Cornish. And I was like, there's no reason for an institution to be here for 100 years and not have everybody know us like UW or like even Seattle City College. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we were like this weird small community in Seattle, like the
Right.
center of Seattle, but only we knew each other.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
down the street there was Jeff Bezos and his balls, but like
So, how do you think? Because I mean, Cornish is small, right?
yeah.
So you would think it would be easier to make it an inclusive space. How do you think
Yeah.
they can do that? Like, because like these large major universities, it'll be harder, right? Because they're
Mhm.
just population wise bigger. But Cornish, is a very small school. We had less than 100 music students.
Mhm.
And you would think that if you change a perspective and an approach, you would make it more inclusive, right?
You know, it's like hindsight is 2020. You can think of all of the things that you could do to promote community, but for whatever reason, like Cornish just did it in all the wrong possible ways. I remember, I think it was like my sophomore year, there was this event that was advertised, and it was called White Guilt and Waffles. And it was
I remember.
one of the like staff members was going to make waffles for all of these white kids, and they were basically going to talk about like white guilt and all of the things that come with that, privilege. And the way that it was advertised, I was like, so is this only for white people? Like, is it going to be an echo chamber of just white voices talking about how bad they feel that they're white? Like, there's gonna be no people of color. So of course, me and my friends like crashed it, and we're kind of like, what
Yeah.
is this? Like, what do you want to come out of this? Because
Mm-hmm.
if there aren't any people there to sort of challenge your perspectives, this is, I don't know, like a liberal arts KKK meeting. Like, I don't know what you're trying to do here. It was,
Yeah.
and I mean, that's one example of many, but God, I don't know what they want to do. And I don't think they know either.
I think you brought up a good like analogy, like this echo chamber,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's what it is. And it's a lot of the students trying to like fight for this inclusive space, right?
Right.
But you don't see it in the faculty and administration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
They
I
would,
think, yeah.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Look.
I was gonna say they would bring in a lot of like guest speakers. I don't know if they did this as much in the music department, but the theater department, whenever we would have like guest speakers, they would almost always be people of color, um, which I thought was really cool. But I was like, I'm not really paying tuition for like master classes with people of color. I would love to have like actual like what's the word, uh just lessons and oh god,
This
I can't even think of
faculty.
the word. Yeah,
Yeah.
like faculty and lesson plans around what it means. I mean, specifically in theater, what it means to access vulnerability and openness and finding your voice as a person of color, because it's not the same. I think a lot of my white counterparts can access vulnerability in ways that I just don't know how to tap into, because that has always been accessible to them. And as like a woman of color, I just like have had to guard my vulnerability more so. And I would explain that to faculty, and they'd basically be like, your vulnerability is so valid, and your feelings are so valid. We just love you. And I'm like, that's not what I need.
You're like, help me
Yeah,
figure this out.
exactly.
So coming from, you know, our liberal arts school now being out in the open,
Mm-hmm.
right? Fend for yourself kind of situation now, and going into straight into quarantine, right? We both
Yeah.
graduated in the middle of quarantine. um, how has that been? How's that been for you?
It's really strange. I mean, I graduated in quarantine. I ended my semester in quarantine, so it was sort of like this upward kind of like spike. I was in one of my first professional shows actually, and I was so excited to do that. It was like Shakespeare, which I had never done before,
Whoa,
and
cool.
I was like, this is it. Like, this is me as a senior getting professional work, making the connections, and then we like never had an opening night because it closed. um, I had to quarantine like immediately after that, and things shut down. I had a Zoom graduation. Like, it was just all of the worst things. And I'm not really the kind of person that's like, woe is me. I'm trying to find the light at the end of the tunnel here, but it's
Mhm.
definitely like, wow. Especially like, I know everybody's doing Zoom theater now, and we've got things coming out like Ratatouille the musical, and
True.
it's I'm hoping it's not a permanent change. I'm trying to do my best to kind of adapt with the times, but you didn't get your degree in Zoom theater, so
It's true.
I don't want this to be permanent. I want to be back on stage and in a room with people. So,
Mhm.
eh, yeah, it's I wish that I could find more motivation to do more creative things. I have like opportunities to have creative outlets, but I'm now like working two jobs, so that's not always accessible. It's not as
Yeah.
accessible as it was.
Um,
Yeah, I think when Kyle and I first like approached this idea, both
Hmm.
of us were feeling the same feelings you were feeling, like how like especially because both you and Kyle graduated during quarantine. I graduated, I think, a year ahead of you guys.
Hmm.
Um, so I got to have my nice graduation. The first graduation also in a really long time that we actually had like caps and gowns, which was and
Really?
yeah, it was like the weirdest reason I think like was the fact that people were naked underneath the gowns, and so they took away the gowns, which to me just
That's
seems like people would just
Oh
show
my
up naked
God.
if they're gonna wear gowns and be naked underneath anyway. But like whatever. Anyway, so they took.
Classic Cornish.
I know, right? That's what I thought too. But we had a really hard time coming up with like motivation to even get this thing off the ground. Like every
Hmm.
time Kyle would, because we would have like weekly meetings, and we'd be like, "So, did you write anything?" Both of us were like, "No, I had no motivation." "Did you do anything this?" "No, I couldn't do it." And so we would kind of hold ourselves accountable for like an hour a week and just like sit and do work in front of each other. But it's hard, especially if
Yeah.
you have to like pay rent and like be a human being. Like it's a hard time.
Yeah, it's definitely really challenging. I mean, but how do you guys think that the podcast has kind of helped with that? Like, that's I as somebody trying to break into the podcasting biz, I know I've seen like three other friends start their own sort of podcasts, and I don't know. I think it's like part therapy. We're all trying to get our emotions out, and part like finding a creative outlet. You know what I mean?
I think we're all looking for that sense of community again.
Yeah.
And I think that's great because I'm not the type of person to always reach out and be like, "Hey, you want to do this, this, and this,"
Mhm.
right? But the podcast allows me to do that, and it lets me reconnect with you. Like I've never thought about working with someone like in the theater department that I had a class with, but then I was like, wait a second, this is a perfect person. So I think it's opened up opportunities of collaboration, which is great, and starting to reconstruct a community.
Right. Yeah. I will say I think it's really cool to see, like, back in March and April, there were so many companies that were like, all of our shows are completely free online. We've got all of these master classes online. Like, that was a really big movement into sort of sharing the wealth, so to speak. It's weird, like, going to college for arts. I just, I don't know. People will be like, "Oh, well, if you want to sing, like, just sing. Why are you paying money to whatever? Why are you paying money to roll around on the floor with your peers and call it theater?" But it's there is training involved in it, and now that we're like all at home, it's like, why not share that knowledge with other people? Why are we like hoarding this knowledge for ourselves? It just makes it that much harder to get into the industry and learn like the ins and outs, you know?
Totally. Yeah, I've been because I started teaching online like lessons during the pandemic.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's been great. I have like a decent setup here. But I've been trying to be really conscious about like if a student has a question, like fully answering that question and not like gatekeeping any of my knowledge or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, kind of like you said, because it doesn't do any good to just hoard knowledge to yourself, especially if you want your community and your students and your peers and your friends and your family to like grow into great human beings. I've been trying really hard to like do a lot of self-reflection in teaching and making sure that my students get what they need and are accomplishing goals that they want to accomplish, especially if their goals aren't like I want to learn out of this book, and their goals like I want to learn a pop song on the piano, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to help them achieve it's been rewarding, but it took me a while to like get in the groove of it.
Yeah, there's definitely like a level of practice and adaptability that comes with moving everything online, which I guess I wasn't expecting just because we're supposed to be the generation that's like so in tune with technology and connected with everything. And I was like, no, this is actually pretty challenging. I like went out and invested in a ring light and like a microphone and all this other stuff because um it's just like I don't want to like look unprofessional. I don't want to appear like this pandemic is hitting harder than it is, even though it is hitting pretty hard. It's I guess it's like everybody's keeping appearances and like, no, the pandemic is happening, but the arts are fine. We'll survive. We're resilient. So, which I
We
believe.
are. We are.
Yeah.
No, it's so true, and it's like what you said. We were trained to be on stage, and all
Hmm.
these in-person stuff. We were never trained to Zoom everything.
Yeah. Oh my God. I watched this like Patti LuPone concert and it was all online and it was just so funny because like she's amazing. She's got this gorgeous voice and she'll finish a song and it's silent. I'm like, oh my God, this is what we've come to. This is
Empty theaters, no
yeah, just
clapping.
singing to no one and nothing.
Oh man.
um okay. I guess I want to talk about, since we're sort of on the topic of accessibility, before COVID, there was this sort of idea around the arts that, anybody can make it if you work hard enough, if you like have the talent, if you've got the moxie, as some would say. And Well, I think that's sort of true. I've been in art schools like most of my life. I never had like a homecoming or the football games or a third sport that I can't think about right now. I don't know. What do they do?
Basketball, baseball.
Baseball.
Yeah,
All the
sure.
balls. Ball
Also,
sports.
All of those things. Yeah, I never had that sort of like opportunity, but I don't know. It seems fun. I'm sure it's not as bad as Euphoria makes it seem. It's probably more fun than that. Um, but in doing so, I had like a firsthand experience with people basically being able to do more things than I could because they could afford to do so. And I feel like that's not talked enough, like the classism within the arts, because race comes into that. It definitely does. But there's like a way that they intersect. It's who can afford classes after they go to school, who can afford to like put money into entering their name in this like scholarship competition. It's all of these different things that go into it. And I don't know. I That's something that they didn't really mention in college either. They would call it networking, but I'm like, okay, but in order to get to these networking events, you have to have the right dress to go to the event or like keep up appearances and like know all of these different hidden things. And while theater is becoming more accessible, I don't think the tricks of the trade are. I think those are still kept from the vast majority of people.
Mhm. No, I agree. It's like when you think of the arts and networking, right?
Hmm.
And all these things, it's like, well, you need to buy the clothes, you need to buy the application, you need to buy, all of these things. And then just to go to the event or even a school event, right? In like high school,
Right.
it's like, well, you have to pay $300 to get your ticket.
Hmm.
And you're like, I barely make any money from the arts to begin with.
Exactly.
And you expect me to, cop up essentially almost $1,000 to get paid a little less than that.
Yeah. It's like, where's your money for your choir dress? Where is your money for the humidifier to put in your room so that you can maintain good vocal health and all of these things? Um, it's I think it's like an ugly truth that we don't want to admit, you know? We want to say, well, art is for everybody, but it's really not. And I wish that we would come to terms with that more. Especially in like musical theater, there's like dance classes and acting classes and singing lessons and like if somebody, I mean, I was lucky enough to be able to sort of afford 3 years in Seattle, but for classmates that had to work outside of that, it was like I don't have any time to fully dedicate myself to the thing that I'm paying, $50,000 for.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I hate to like cut it off, but I think we should um wrap it up, and I think we can continue this talk on our next podcast, which will be next week. It's a two-parter with our lovely
Two-parter.
Gabrielle.
Yes.
Yeah, we're really excited to have her be the feature of the first half of February. It's a true treat, really a true treat.
Thanks.
Of course, of course. So like, subscribe when you can, comment when you can, share, rate us 5 stars, all that good stuff.
Throw in the
Gabrielle.
Patreon.
Oh yeah, please join our Patreon. Kyle and I are in the process of trying to get together some merch, so be on the lookout for that in the future. I know.
Exciting. Oh
We're
my
so
gosh.
excited. We're so excited. Gabrielle, do you want to plug anything, any social media projects, all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. You can follow me on Instagram at Gabrielle.Friedman. I know that's very exciting, very cool. Um, And then, I don't know, if you want to follow me on TikTok, it's Yeehaw Gabrielle.
Yes. We will put
Um,
Gabrielle's links everywhere for everyone to follow. TikTok's been my favorite pastime too.
It's so fun. It's the like ingenuity and creativity on that app is hilarious. And yeah, if you follow me on Instagram, you know, you may or may not hear about a podcast coming very soon that I'm excited to announce, hopefully before the summer.
Yay!
Fun stuff.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we will see you next time on Pitch and Tonic. Music ideas you can sip with a drink.
I love how you're
Right on.
waving, Kyle.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.